Today's analysts have access to AI-enabled tools and platforms that make them faster and more efficient. However, this also brings a heightened risk for errors. The primary challenge for analysts today is conducting accurate and unbiased analysis at speed. Biases can easily creep into our analysis, leading to flawed conclusions even when we are conducting the most advanced analyses possible. To overcome this challenge, it is crucial for analysts to spot and mitigate biases. Let's examine the primary biases that work their way into data analysis so that you can recognize them, challenge them, and remove them from your own analysis today on Art+Science. Hey there, I'm Kevin Hartman, Associate Professor at the University of Notre Dame and founder of the Art+Science Analytics Institute, where our mission is to make you a better analyst. Biases are mental shortcuts we take or systematic errors in our processes that skew analysis, resulting in misguided perceptions, inadequate choices, and untrustworthy outcomes. Biases have always been a hindrance for analysts, but because analysts today are moving much faster than they ever did before, biases are now playing an increasingly critical role in differentiating between accurate and erroneous analysis. In this video, we will explore 4 key biases: anchoring bias, accessibility bias, sampling bias, and confirmation bias. And we'll discuss methods for preventing their influence so that you as an analyst can deliver precise and impactful analyses. Anchoring bias can cause analysts to give excessive weight to the initial frame of their analysis, leading them to overlook the bigger picture. By being anchored to status quo thinking, analysts will focus on the analysis of the question they were given without really looking past that to see the question they should be answering. This bias can restrict the range of analysis we conduct and the possible conclusions that we might draw. A really good example of anchoring bias could be seen in the 1970s when Pepsi faced an anchoring bias challenge when it came to the packaging of their product. Pepsi was fixated on copying Coca-Cola's iconic hourglass-shaped bottle, thinking that having their own iconic shape would lead them to success. However, it wasn't until John Sculley took over as VP of Marketing, John Sculley, who would later rise to fame as a marketing wizard at Apple. This is when the company shifted its focus away from trying to match Coca-Cola's hourglass, iconic-shaped bottle to really understand customer preferences and realize that they weren't trying to build a better bottle. They were trying to beat Coca-Cola as the market leader. When John led the team to step back and look at the real question they were trying to answer, this is when innovation came in. The result was the invention of the 2-liter bottle of soda, which gave customers more soda in a larger format that competed very well against the smaller 6.5-ounce bottles that Coca-Cola and every other soda player in the industry was offering. By breaking away from the anchor of competing with Coke's design, Pepsi was able to shift their perspective and achieve the success that they were seeking. To overcome the effects of anchoring bias in your own analysis, it is critical to expand your analysis to get to the question that you should be answering, not the one that your initial frame sets up. When analysts only consider information that is easily accessible, the data they have, they may overlook important data that requires more effort to attain, but could be the data they really need. This is accessibility bias, and this type of bias leads to superficial analyses and incomplete understanding of the situation at hand. A demonstration of accessibility bias comes when I conduct a case study called the Carter Racing Case Study with my students at the University of Notre Dame. In a nutshell, the case asks students to choose whether or not to participate in a major motor race under unusually cold weather conditions. What complicates the students' choice is the fact that the team has suffered a number of different engine failures during the season, and some people on the team feel the failures are due to cold temperatures, while others say the engine failure is a completely random occurrence. Students are provided data that plots engine failures at different temperatures, and they do indeed seem to occur over a wide range of temps. The majority of students in this case study take those data and they determine there isn't a clear correlation, and they make the decision to race. However, students who take a moment to step back, really look at the entire picture, realize that to make an educated and informed decision on whether or not to race and whether or not temperature determines engine failure, They need to know what was the temperature when they successfully completed a race, when the engine did not fail. When you pull these data into the analysis, the data they really need, you realize that the team has only completed races successfully when it is comfortably warm outside. You also see that when the temperature starts to get cold, this is when the clear preponderance of engine failures occur. To overcome accessibility bias, analysts must objectively evaluate the question at hand and compare the available data, the data they have, with those data that could really give them insight into the answer of the question they're pursuing. That's the data they really need. Doing so guarantees that the analyst is not influenced by convenience, but rather considers all relevant information for a comprehensive analysis. Sampling bias occurs when we present a sample used for analysis that does not accurately represent the entire population that it's meant to portray. This type of bias can influence results, especially in surveys that we are conducting, and it can potentially lead us to conclusions that are not representative or relevant to the larger group. Collecting a sample of people who are not representative of the whole population that we're trying to assess is an obvious example of sampling bias, and there are tons of those in history. But let's return to another case involving Coke for a more nuanced and interesting version of sampling bias. In the 1980s, Coca-Cola conducted a taste test that led to the development of New Coke. In this case, the company conducted extensive tests comparing the original formula with a new, sweeter version, the New Coke, and early results suggested that people preferred that new taste. Confident in these results, Coca-Cola launched New Coke only to face significant backlash and plummeting sales. The problem here for Coke was that the taste tests they were conducting were really only sip tests. The participants were only given a small sip of each drink. And the bias arose because people may prefer a sweeter taste in a small amount, but not necessarily in a full can or bottle of soda. That sip did not accurately reflect the entire product experience, which is drinking a full bottle serving of the soda that you've purchased. Coca-Cola ultimately reintroduced the original formula as Coke Classic. In this case, it illustrates sampling bias, showing how a limited, unrepresentative sample method can skew business decisions by overlooking essential customer factors like the experience of the full product. Look, obtaining a completely accurate sample of consumers, one that entirely and fully represents the full population, can be very, very difficult to do. So instead of discarding an imperfect sample of consumers for our study, it's more important to really understand how that sample compares to the broader population. When we understand that, we can add weightings to our sample and adjust those results to represent the full range of perspectives in our broader population. But this idea of mitigating sampling bias by acknowledging the limitations of the sample really holds true when we are doing product samples as well. When conducting a product sample, it is just as important that that sample is representative of the full product experience, or at least that we understand how that sample differs from the full product experience. In either case, we must clearly understand those differences so that we can make more informed, broader decisions based on the sample we've collected. Confirmation bias occurs when an analyst is actively seeking out and interpreting data that confirms their already established beliefs or hypotheses, instead of objectively considering all available information and allowing their conclusion to organically rise out of the data. Confirmation bias can result in a reinforcement of our own initial ideas and hypotheses, even if it goes against the facts or, in some cases, against reality. During a meeting that I had with the chief marketing officer of a global fast food chain, an example of confirmation bias came pretty clear. I was sharing an analysis that revealed a unmistakable shift in consumer viewing habits away from traditional TV and towards digital platforms like YouTube, Netflix, and others. I was doing this in the hopes of getting this CMO to acknowledge that all the money they had been spending on traditional television needed to be rethought, that they needed to shift some of that traditional television spend into digital platforms to reach new consumers. However, despite solid data indicating this shift, the CMO dismissed my findings and argued that their internal analysis showed a clear relationship between TV spend and the company's sales over time. This was, in their mind, because both of them moved up and to the right over time. The CMO used this data to demonstrate that TV was the main driver for their sales. And let us remind you here at this moment, dear viewer, that there's a difference between correlation and causality. Here, my CMO friend had clearly mistaken the two. But there was something else happening as well. The CMO's data showed that they were indeed spending more on television over time, as that did go up and to the right, as they pointed out. And the data that I presented on the shift of viewing habits from traditional TV to digital platforms was clear as well. You could not doubt that. So how could these two things be true at the same time? Well, the CMO's internal data did not show that while the number of people watching traditional TV was going down, the price they were paying for that advertising was going up at a pretty extraordinary rate. Hence, their spend was indeed going up and to the right, but the number of people they were reaching was actually going down. This made it highly improbable that the investment they were making in television advertising had a causal relationship to their sales, even if the spend did appear to be correlated. However, the CMO saw the two trend lines moving in the same direction, assumed that correlation meant causality, and believed that the data proved their point. This incident demonstrates confirmation bias, as the CMO sought to confirm their preconceived belief rather than objectively evaluating the truth. They didn't look past the correlation they saw to ask if this is really causal, or how that correlation had come to be. In order to counteract confirmation bias, it is crucial to question our own assumptions and seek critical feedback from others. Keep an open mind, and when analyzing data, allow the story to unfold naturally, organically, without any bias. Continually ask ourselves, what are we overlooking? What are we dismissing? What kind of evidence that goes against our initial theory? By doing so, you will be able to protect against confirmation bias and reach the real conclusion, not the conclusion that you are looking for. Throughout every stage of an analysis project, it is crucial to be mindful of our biases. During the initial planning phase, we must consider how accessibility and anchoring biases can affect our starting point. And in the data collection and data analysis phases, sampling errors and confirmation biases, respectfully, have the potential to sway our final interpretation. Staying vigilant and actively challenging these biases is necessary for true understanding and for overcoming them. Understanding and acknowledging your biases can greatly enhance the quality of your analysis and prevent it from becoming distorted, especially in these days when we are moving as quickly as we are. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already, take a moment and subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with anyone who you think is interested in data analytics. Every single week, we are bringing new, exciting, and important videos on data analytics to this channel, and we would love to have you there for the journey. Be sure to check out the links in the description for this video below, where we'll have additional art science resources, and sign up for our newsletter to get exclusive tips, course updates, and more directly in your inbox. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.